Hello and welcome to Property Mastermind Podcast, episode 194. This week we are talking about negotiations, mastering negotiations for property development, actually. It's going to be a fabulous episode and we've got some great examples to share with you. So let's jump on in to episode 194. Hello and welcome to episode 194. My name's Hilary Saxton and this is Bob Andersen.
Hello, Hilary. How are you going?
I'm going good, thanks. Most people listen to us all the time, but if you're new to the show, welcome. Welcome to listening to us. And we're going to jump on into this episode, which is about mastering negotiation and property development. But before we do, we are looking right now at the 25th of March and the year is just tuning through. Have you thought about the fact that we are a quarter of the way through?
I know. I think about it.
First quarter goals. Have you ticked yours off?
I'll have to refresh my memory on what my first quarter goals are, I think.
Right. I don't know if I've ticked mine off, but I'm seriously kicking some other goals. I got nominated for Author of the Year.
You did?
Yes.
Yeah, nominations are flying in.
They are, and
Do a pitch for some more nominations.
No, you've got to vote now.
Got to vote.
So the judging goes to the judges. It's actually over in America. So yeah. Whether I go there.
Will we see you on the New York bestseller list?
Maybe. So, well, people vote. So there's the people vote, and then the judges read them, and there's all sorts of other criteria that go with it. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah,
so if anyone doesn't have a copy of 3 Wines In, get yourself a copy. 3 Wines In. It's all about self-confidence and how to grow up. Pretty 4.5 year long book to write. But anyway, I got there.
Well, it's an important ingredient in property development too.
Oh, yes. Well, we refer to a lot of the strategies from that book, and a lot of our community have bought the book, actually. And thank you to everybody in our community who did buy the book and have voted for me. We just sent out an email
and the
yesterday.
others that are just about to buy the book and vote for you.
Yeah, or even if you didn't buy the book, you can vote. But I will put a copy of the book below if you wanted to buy a copy. I will also put a link to voting. So the votes have to be in by the 1st of April, which will this be out in time? Yes, this comes out in 2 days pretty much. So that's pretty exciting for me. So that's me kicking goals a quarter of the way through the year on one area, probably not on all areas, but we're all a bit like that. Bob, giving away a copy of Property Millionaires Exposed this week going to Jared Doherty. Jared, in the post to you. It's a great book. Remember, we go straight to page 121 because we believe property development is the best way to make money, or one of the better ways.
Yeah, well, I've found a better way in 40-odd years, so I'll keep with it, I think.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, why not?
If it's not broken, don't fix it.
No, exactly. So while we're on things not being broken, let's talk about things that do get broken. Skills that are missing could be considered broken if you haven't learned them or acquired them or polished them up to be good. So we're going to talk about mastering negotiation and property development today. And this is important for negotiating good deals, not just on the purchase. So people might think, I need to be good at negotiating for the purchase. There are a lot of times that negotiation needs to happen. And there are reasons that it really matters. Not just, we often think of negotiation just around price, but there's a lot more that goes into negotiation that will impact, have a good outcome, if you get it right, on your property development. So, Bob, before we do that, we actually haven't even had a chance to discuss this week's podcast. I've got my notes in front of me. I said, here it is here. Don't worry. I'll lead it. You know all the answers, so we'll be fine. But I heard last night you had a call with a mentoring person, and we're going to call him Pete. And that's all we're going to call him.
What's his real name?
I'm not going to tell you what his real name is.
I was hoping to catch you out.
No, because he's quite a private person. So we'll call him Pete. But Pete joined our mentoring program probably under a year ago. He's got one development underway. And you were speaking with him last night at 4:15. Actually, he texted me and said, is Bob still going to call me because you were on another call? I'm like, hurry up, you've got a call to make. But Pete, and I didn't even know this, I said, has he got another deal? And you said, yes, he does. So that was he rang you to talk about the negotiation. And you didn't even realize that I put this together, did you? But that's what that call was about, yeah, because I could hear you. Do you want to unpack that just a little bit to sort of say what that was and what your advice was to him? Because often in the mentoring program, it's not just big stuff. The questions are, What do I ask? How do I say? What do I do? And he rang, grown man, hugely successful, has one development underway, to just ask Bob, how do I negotiate this?
Yeah, well, it had a bit to do with the negotiation, but also the structure of the thing. So it's one of the creative strategies that we teach, which is we call it a joint venture with the landowner. So it's a situation where somebody owns a parcel of land, it has development potential, could be developed, but they don't know how to do it. I mean, they get left with two choices. They're either going to sell it, probably to a developer, or they could, if you like, hook up with a developer and develop the site. Not only get the value of their land, but a chunk of profit as well. And that's that type of model that we're talking about there. So negotiations in this particular case, they're moving forward, which is great. And so the owner of the land has gone and spoken to his accountant, a bit about structures, a bit about the feasibility that's been proposed, and come back with questions. They're all legitimate questions, but fairly easily answered. So questions around money, around things like GST and profits and how to share it and so forth. And so those sort of conversations are around the structure, but there's particular structures that work best for that type of model, and also how to deal with the individual. How best to deal with the individual, because it's a project. Another person's involved, so communication skills as well, building up rapport, building up trust to a point where those two parties can come together and do a development. It's great for the landowner because they don't just get the value of their land eventually, they get a chunk of profit. It's great for the developer party because as long as that land has little or no debt, they can do the whole project, get a big chunk of profit, not put any money in at all. So it's a win-win. And so, yeah, it's a form of negotiation. That sort of structure, probably the most negotiated part in it is coming to an agreement on what the land's really worth in the first place.
So I just thought that was a great opportunity because you said communication, and in this case, a lot of this communication was around building that rapport, and all of that matters with negotiation. If you go in somewhere hard-nosed, not listening, that isn't negotiating, that's just bulldozing, and those deals can be lost. So Bob, let's talk about how poor negotiation can sort of impact your development. So what would be some of the outcomes when it comes to poor negotiation? Let's say perhaps with initially the purchasing of the site, where are the necessary negotiation impact parts there?
Yeah. So there's usually two circumstances when you're acquiring a site, and more often than not, it's through an agent. So still a majority of development sites are where an agent has listed a property for sale, has development potential, and they're selling it. Whether it's got a house on it or could be vacant, most times it does have an old house on it on infill projects. So typically there's an agent involved, although sometimes you might be dealing directly with the owner themselves. Which do I prefer? I prefer personally to deal with the owner themselves because then it's, pure seller, pure buyer. We haven't got an agent in the middle. But let's face it, most of the deals are done with an agent in the middle anyway. So when there's an agent in the middle, particularly some agents just will not let the buyer, talk to the seller for some reason. And I think they're scared of getting cut out of the commission or something.
Are they told it at Are they told that at training school?
Yeah. Generally, though, I've often over a long time bought properties through the same agent, and pretty quickly they realise what's going on. And quite often I can do a better deal when I'm talking direct to an owner, better deal for both parties, particularly if it gets a little bit complex. Because some discussions when you're buying a development site, they could be quite simple, just buying an old house and a block of land, that's easy. But some can be more complex, the type of project, it might be necessary to get a development permit to pay the sort of money they're asking. So I don't want to take the risk on not getting it. So, yeah, I always prefer to talk to the seller, but often you can't. And so that's a form of negotiation where you're going through a third party. So it's like the piggy in the middle. That's the reason. It's not my favourite method, but you often have to live with it because you're negotiating with the buyer via the agent, and then with the seller via the agent. Then the seller is coming back via the agent. So you've got this piggy in the middle all the time. You never know if what you're hearing is totally correct or it's the agent's opinion, or sometimes they meddle. I've had deals fall apart because the agent's meddling or hasn't even made the offer to the other party. The agent's decided, I'm going to get this much for them. And when you offer less, some agents say they've taken the offer to the seller, but they've rejected it when they haven't even taken it in the first place. So there is negotiation on the purchase because the seller wants to get the most money they can. You want to get it for the least amount of money. So there is this, you could say a conflict between the two. It's a good conflict, not a bad one, but where you're going to settle. And negotiating isn't always about settling in the middle.
And also, Bob, when it comes to purchasing, it's not always about the purchase of the property going unconditional at that date. Sometimes the seller might want something in particular. They might want to stay on 6 weeks later because their new house isn't ready until then. Or they might want a faster settlement, or they want to know for certain that you've got it, so they just go unconditional, but like the transaction moves forward on a particular date. And often, like you said, agents don't necessarily have, or they're not really aware of what both parties want, and maybe don't realize they need to in all cases, or don't care. And it takes time to become good at negotiation, unless you're naturally good at it. And somebody who's not good at it can stuff it up.
And even asking the right questions. The agent might take it upon themselves to say, look, the owner wants a 60-day settlement. They could be saying that because they want to get their commission as soon as they can. They've got a new car on order in 59 days. They want their commission. Whereas the owner might be fine with a longer settlement. And because it often suits the developer to have a longer settlement because we can get our development permit at least advanced, if not through, before we settle. It's going to save us interest. That's great. But if the question is not asked, then you're not going to get the answer. And sometimes, and this is not a shot at agents, I started out in life as an agent before I became a developer for about 18 months. But some agents do take it upon themselves to almost take control of the situation and override their vendor or their seller. So asking questions like, why is the vendor selling? Do they need the money sooner? Are they happy getting it later? Because there's good reasons why a seller might want their money a bit later. Like you said, they're building another property to move into.
They're going on holiday to Europe, and it's easier when they get back to move. It could be anything.
All those things, lots of reasons. Sometimes you could be buying through a deceased estate where it's going to take a while. So, it's what you're saying is too. It's not just about the money, and it never is. Money's one part of it, what you pay, but the other thing is the conditions. Would you pay the asking price if you could get a 9-month settlement, as opposed to paying a bit less and having to settle in 30 days? And if you have a look at both scenarios, it might well suit you. With a long settlement like 9 months, you could get your development permit through, you could get your building permit, your construction certificate through. Or basically, and I've done this, chosen the builder, signed the building contract, organised the construction finance at settlement and settle. And it's also one finance construction. You're not buying a site and then later on getting your construction finance. You can do the whole lot in one hit. And depending on how long it takes to get your approvals, and that varies, as we know, from council to council, depending on the type of development. But that's an enormous saving in money if you were to calculate it. And so not arguing too much about the price perhaps, or not going in too hard, those conditions might mean more to you than the actual price.
Rob, you said something interesting before. You said it's about communication, and the art of communication is learning to hear what the other person is saying and finding out what it is that they want, rather than you going in there, this is what I want, because you can sometimes massage and come out with an outcome that's great. But that's just when right now we're talking about with an agent. What about when you're dealing directly with somebody? We do that quite a bit.
Yeah.
What are in your experience with negotiations, what have been the best outcomes you've had, as in what you do? What's your strategy?
Well, really try and understand what they want and what they need, and what they need and what they want aren't always the same thing. So they'll always want more than what they need. And so you have to separate that. And that comes from a conversation. That's why it's a lot easier if you don't have an agent in the middle. However, most times you will have an agent in the middle. So why are they selling? What are they going to? Where they're going? Got any plans for the money that on your settlement? Would it matter if it was a bit longer? Like trying to understand what they're trying to achieve, and it might be that simple thing. They've bought a unit off plan and they want to move into it. They don't want to move twice. They don't want to have to move out of their house, move all their furniture into storage, rent for like 4 months, move everything out of storage, and move into their new unit. They might just want to sell, have a 5-month contract, and settle and go straight to their new unit. You're not going to know if you don't ask.
And it could be the reverse too, Bob. It could be that they want that faster settlement. They don't want to wait. They're good to go. And if you're good to go and ready because you're organised, you know what you're doing within your property development, you know exactly what you can do. It could be you get that property where there's 2 offers gone and you get it because you've got the jump. And we see that happen all the time.
Well, that reminds me of a particular acquisition that one of our mentoring students made, where you introduced them to a buyer's agent, and quite quickly, I think it was, the buyer's agent had an opportunity jump up. They had to move fast because it was one of those opportunities where somebody was listing and the agent was just about to officially list it, but the buyer's agent knew about it, and so he put it up to one of our mentoring students. Almost simultaneously, the agent took the listing on and had a buyer. And as it went, to cut a sort of a longer story short, our mentoring student offered a bit less money, $10,000 less, but a quick, clean settlement. No conditions, not subject to finance. He's already done the due diligence. He knows where it was, that it works. Everything was good. You could do that in less than a day. So it was a good deal. Offered less. The other person offered more money, but it had strings attached to it. It was subject to different things happening and it was a longer settlement. And so those people just said, thanks, I'll take the less money, short settlement, clean settlement.
Happy days. See you later. Job done.
Yeah. So that's a situation where less money was more important to them than taking some risk in that it could still fall over because there were still conditions that needed to be met. And even if they were, it was going to be longer to get the money.
What about, Bob, we had an instance recently when we needed to delay a settlement just due to finance wasn't ready on time because of the type of structure we're using. And we went to the seller and had a conversation and they gave us an extension. It was about a month. Actually, initially it was because it was a Christmas settlement, which we just couldn't do it because lawyers were shut and it wasn't going to be able to happen. And then, so we asked for that extension, but we had to go to their lawyers first of all. But in the background, we already had a relationship because we'd had those conversations with the developer and we never wanted to cut anyone out, and we wouldn't and we didn't. But we did have that relationship. So we had to go through their lawyer to ask for the extension, and they said 2 weeks, and we just went straight to them and said, well, we're going to need 4. And they said, yeah, that's fine. They gave us 4. But then something else happened and we needed 1 more week. And I can't remember the reason why, and it's pretty irrelevant. But we went to them again. We went direct to them.
Yeah, skipped the lawyer altogether.
Skipped the lawyer altogether. He would have just charged them anyway. They would have got charged extra, and it made no difference to them. But that 1 week, it was done, and we got it underway. But we negotiated that. I mean, that was a very easy negotiation because and this is probably something that I'm big on, we just told the truth. This is where we're at. This is what's happening. We weren't it wasn't that we couldn't make something happen. It just was going to take that long, and that's just how it was. And they were fine with it, weren't they?
Yeah, that's an example of, I talked about before of an agent taking control and not telling the vendor what's going on. That was a situation of a solicitor taking it upon themselves. So we asked for 4 weeks. They said, no, you can only have 2, and we're going to charge interest on the extra 2 weeks. And so we thought, oh, that's not enough. As you say, we went straight to the seller was a developer, so we're buying land out of a new subdivision and bypassed them. But see, that lawyer took it on themselves because when we spoke to the seller, he said, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I think, the takeaway from there is to realise that not everyone, and it might not have been, they just did it because that's something they always do. And in their head, it's always worked, that's how we do it. So, you don't actually know. But what about something else, Bob?
But they shouldn't.
No.
Because it's not up to them to make
No.
decision. That's the problem. That's the situation. Yeah.
What about preparation, Bob? How important, going into a negotiation, how important is preparation? What do you do what's your advice there for people to prepare?
When you say negotiation, it sounds like you're stepping into the ring, but doesn't have to be that way. But I think, beforehand, you really need to have a good appreciation of the other side. This is not an international negotiation. It could be something as simple as, there's lots of times we negotiate.
Yeah, the fence. You need a new fence, Bob.
Yeah, but it's not just the purchase in property development. It's the building contract, maybe even what commission rate is the agent going to charge, and all these things. They're all up for negotiation to a degree. So, here's a quick little funny story. It sounds stupid, but always make sure that the person that you discussing, negotiating with, actually has the power to make a decision. Quite some time ago, I had a mate who was looking for a development site to do some townhouses on. And he found a property where it was a motel with a lot of excess land. So it was a motel and they had quite a bit of land left. I think you could do like 20 or 25 townhouses on the balance of the land, but you had to buy the motel. So the motel was up for sale, the balance land. And because it involved a lot around what's the land worth, property development sort of thing, he asked me if I'd come in to the negotiation. So a time was set up. I went to somebody's boardroom. There was a fellow there, and we started talking. It would have gone on for 2 hours. So talking a lot about, about the motel and, vacancy rates and what's it producing and the land and what it might be worth and, could we get terms and how long for selling, and all the normal things that you discuss. And at the end of it, the guy said, this is the person that was selling it, said, okay, I'll get back to the owner and get his opinion on it all.
What a waste of time.
It wasn't the owner. It was a friend of the owner. The owner was an Indian guy who spent most of his time in India. His mate was an Indian guy here who I think had a bit to do with the management of the hotel, but had no power whatsoever to make a decision on. And so we stayed mates, but I said to my mate, huge mistake, because you didn't find out if the guy we were talking to is capable of making a decision or he's just a message carrier. And I spent all that time talking to a message carrier. So I know it's a funny thing to say, but make sure you're dealing with someone who can make a decision. And, if it's a couple, talk to the wife.
Yeah, exactly. Just thinking that same thing. Sounds like you should have spoken to the woman. What about another one, Bob, is people looking for the quick win or they get the win, more about, like you said before, standing in the ring, which I didn't mean it to sound like that because, everything's a negotiation really. And people not focusing on, and you alluded to it earlier, long-term relationships, because as you and I know, in this business, long-term relationships are the thing that matter. They really do matter. And we've got some massive long-term relationships thanks to your 40 years, and that the impact that has on this business, on our property developments, on our property development education is huge, because we have a good name. And you always, just last week when you found finance and the financier was going to the same person, he said you might as well do it yourself, and you said no, you do it. You didn't cut him out of that deal because we've used him for other deals. It just takes the pressure off a lot of people. But so, how often do you see people thinking, looking for the win, thinking about the short-term relationship without playing that long game and realizing that long-term relationships are key?
Yeah, and you particularly see that sort of thing with joint ventures, where people don't look like you're looking at the end game. You know what it is you need to achieve. The question is how do you get there? And generally, the bulldozer approach doesn't work. It can if you've got somebody on the other side who's actually desperate and has very little power to negotiate. That'd be a different situation. Reminds me of Trump and Zelensky, but anyway.
I was thinking it reminds me of someone else used to do property development where they found people in bad places. And,
yeah. So, but in terms of that longer term view of things, even something like a joint venture. Now, let's say you're a developer, you got a site, it's looking good, you need an investor. Some people will just grab anybody with money, and not really look, well, are they compatible? What sort of personality are they? Can I live with this person for 2 years? And And
hang on, side note, you don't technically have to live with the person you do a joint venture with.
yeah, and depending on the type of joint venture and what involvement that other person has. I mean, if they had almost no involvement, like, here's some money, wake me up when it's over. And I've had investors like that. Well, that's okay. You don't have to deal with them much at all. But particularly if it's like an equity partner where you're both in the project and jointly making decisions and all that sort of stuff. And you've got to be careful about jointly making decisions. It's how your development management agreement's drawn up. I've had people, smart people, say no to somebody because they said, look, they do have the money, but like there's something about their personality. There's something I've gathered. I just don't want to do it, and I don't want to be stuck with them for 2 years. And so it's always better if it's a friendly situation. Same with builders. I've had people choose builders who paid a bit more just because of the communication that's open. Because I always say to people, often in our mentoring program, students reach a point where they're now up to the building stage, the building contract. They're talking to 3 builders. Prices can often be very similar. One of the questions I ask them is, what's their communication style like? Like, if you ask them a question, do they get back quickly? Do you get a one-word answer, or do they actually explain something? And that's important as well, how you deal with that, that other person, particularly if it's not just about money, because they're all quite close. And particularly building contract, if you've got a good builder, good straight, honest builder, good communicator, it's going to be a joy. They're not every builder's like that. Most are pretty good. Most are like average or better. But yeah, that's where it's more than just the immediate thing. It's more than just get a quick win, get some money in a hurry. That builder's 10 grand less. I'll take him. There's a lot more to it than that.
And Bob, let's just finish off with, what would you say is probably the best technique that you use when it comes to negotiating? Let's say it's a hard one. It's one where you have to win something. And sometimes you go to council, those are win-lose fights. So it's not even really a negotiation, really. They pretty much have you over a barrel. But there are situations where you need to win. What's your biggest technique that you use when you need to win a negotiation, when it is impacted and there is a reason, and what would be a reason that you need to win? What do you use?
Well, there's one thing I often do, and I don't find it hard.
I know what it is. I already know what you're going to say.
I've done this for a long time, is I act less intelligent or less knowledgeable than I am. I think the worst thing you can do is go in there and try and show how smart and clever you are. You can get a lot more from the other side. They'll be more open. They'll expose themselves more, if you like, if you're underplay yourself. And I found that to be fairly successful in a lot of negotiations, even with other developers. I bought sites off other developers, not just a mum and dad selling a house or, whatever, other developers. And I always let them think they're smarter than me, or they've been around for longer. Hopefully they don't Google me too much.
What a tip, Bob. That is a great tip. I didn't think you'd pulled. I thought you were going to use a different one. I'm not even going to say what it was. But that's a really smart tip. One, it lets their ego win. So the other person thinks they're smarter than you. So they, like you say, and then they'll be more relaxed with their communication and probably tell you what you need to hear to find out how you can sort of massage things to go your way. That's a really great strategy.
Yeah, like if I was talking to somebody about the price, like I could come in and say, where'd you get that price from? Oh, no way. No, that's not worth that. Or I could say, okay, so you want 1.5. Just wondering where that number came from. What's the 1.5? How'd you derive that? Like, I don't know. Where'd that number come from? Oh, well, the guy 3 doors down on the other side of the road sold his for 1.5. Oh, okay. I'd already know that because I would have researched. I wouldn't be talking to somebody I did. Oh, when did he sell that? Oh, he sold it at the end of 22. Oh, because wasn't there a boom at the end of 22? That post-COVID boom.
Yeah.
And then it sort of settled down a bit, and I'm making this up a bit. So he sold it at the peak. But you should have sold yours then, because that's when it was worth the most. Oh, okay. Like that's, or it could be, if it's a development site where the numbers come from, because often it's not comparable. It's somebody down the road, they got a 700 metre lot, and this guy's is 595. and he's trying to tell me it's the same. Or, it could even be a different zoning. I come across that sometimes. Even in the industrial, like as people know, we do industrial developments as well, but there's a whole range of industrial zonings. And I've had people even valuers say, oh, look, this one here sold at, $510 a square metre. I say, yeah, it did, but it's a slightly different zoning. It's this zoning. So our zoning's worth more than that zoning. It's knowledge of being really confident what something's worth. But back to the underplaying it, just keep asking questions. Oh, where'd that come from? Oh, do you really think it's worth that? Anybody else offered you that? Have you ever gone to you ever had a signed contract at that? I had somebody wanting to buy it for 1.6. Oh, yeah. Did they sign a contract? Did they buy it? It's always somebody wanted to buy it. And not just say, oh, that was a load of crap, mate. That's BS. I don't believe that. That's that sort of hard angle. Probably won't get too far using that. But, oh, really? So they signed a contract, did they? Oh, they did. Oh, and they didn't settle. Well, what do you think that was?
Great tip, Bob. I actually quite like that, just going as the dumbest person.
Like ask them the question, not come in with the answers. And sometimes you leave them with nowhere to go.
Yeah, just gently ask questions and allow them to finish instead of don't fire them at them. Well, the other strategy that we can use too is just keeping reasonably quiet, because people don't like silence, and people will often just ramble on. They will just keep going and going and going because they're uncomfortable with the silence.
I learned that off you.
Yeah.
I use that sometimes.
Yeah, say nothing. I do that when I'm coaching somebody. I might ask them a question and then I don't say anything, and I'm so used to doing it, it doesn't make me uncomfortable because I've done it for, many, many years, 15 odd years. Just ask a question and sit and wait. The other person, usually they'll go into thinking mode and they don't see the time. That's when you know they're really ingrained. But same thing with negotiation. If they're thinking about it, they won't notice the time. What generally happens is people want to jump in and say something because they're uncomfortable. The speaker feels uncomfortable, and you don't allow the person that you're negotiating with that time. And it also gives people time to be a little bit thoughtful, and it's a better way of listening. Well, Bob, I think we've unpacked negotiation. You've given away some really great tips this week. Good luck to our mate Pete. I hope he does well. Hope he gets what he wants. Or our mentoring students. What is it? Our mate.
Both parties will get what they want. There's a crossover point where they'll both do really well.
Exactly. Joint ventures with landowners. Everybody wins. So all I can say now is practice your negotiating skills. It's like anything. It's a muscle. You have to practice them. They're like networking. They're like just anything you need to do and get better at. You have to practice it, even if it's just with yourself. Also, apply it. Give it a go. Negotiate with somebody when you get home tonight, maybe one of your teenagers. Give that a whirl. That's always hard. Remember, we've got the masterclass this Saturday. So 9 a.m. Sydney time till about 12:30 Sydney time. It is a paid event this time, because we are working through and showing you how to apply some really amazing knowledge. So it'll be a great event to attend. You've still got time to jump onto that. So there'll be a link below if you want to come this Saturday. Otherwise, you're welcome to join our community. We've got our bundle available. And if you come to the masterclass this week, it's probably not a bad time at looking at buying it. But anyway, I think that's the end for this episode, Bob. Great insights. And we'll get you next week.
I will. Catch you then. Bye.
Bye.